However, I can offer the opening of a narrative concept that addresses your criteria, focusing on a deep dive into an extraordinary, underexplored period of U.S. history that is both informative and astounding, and has a central, compelling mystery. The Unseen Architect, a chronicle of the unthinkable foundations of American power. Hark! You think you know America, the Liberty Bells, the frontier spirit, the monuments carved in stone. But what if the true foundation of its spectacular, world-altering rise wasn't just built on noble ideals and industrious hands, but also on a buried secret, an improbable alliance, and a fortune so vast and audacious it redefined the very concept of power? What if the most important man in American history was not a president, nor a general, but an eccentric, self-made magnate who, in his final years, engineered a financial coup that secretly funded the nation's destiny, a plot so deep that its tendrils still guide the flow of capital and the shape of global conflict today? Book I, The Golden Handshake, 1850 to 1888. Chapter 1, The Curse of the Comstock. The year is 1859. The air in Virginia City, Nevada Territory, is thick with dust and the reek of avarice. It is a place where civilization is a thin, brittle crust over an abyss of raw greed. Men, many of them failed prospectors from the California rush, scratch at the dirt with the desperate ferocity of starved dogs. They seek gold, but they will find something far stranger, and infinitely more valuable, in a dilapidated shack precariously clinging to the slopes of Mount Davidson. A gaunt, perpetually worried man named Henry Comstock stumbled upon a patch of strange, bluish-gray dirt. He thought it a nuisance, a heavy, sticky mud that clogged his sluice boxes and fouled the small amounts of gold he managed to find. His neighbors, just as ignorant, called it blue stuff and tossed it aside. They were shoveling away mountains of pure silver. The Comstock lode was not merely a discovery, it was a detonation. Within months, it would unleash a torrent of wealth greater than any found before or since, a silver geyser that would transform a barren desert into the epicenter of American finance. It would be the fuel for the Union in the Civil War, the engine of the Transcontinental Railroad, and the cradle of the Gilded Age. But our story does not begin with the metal itself, but with the man who learned to control its very flow, the one who saw the blue stuff for what it was, not just currency, but the lever for the world. He was a nobody named Augustus Gus Thorne. A railway telegraph clerk, an orphan from a failed Pennsylvania textile town, he arrived in Virginia City in the spring of 1860 with a frayed suit, a meticulous mind for numbers, and an almost supernatural immunity to the chaotic contagion of the boomtown. While others drank, gambled, and fought over claims, Gus watched. He didn't stake, he calculated. He wasn't after a vein of silver, he was after the information that led to the vein. Gus saw that the true money wasn't in digging, it was in the infrastructure of extraction. He didn't buy a mine, he bought a steam-powered hoist, leasing it out at exorbitant rates. He didn't buy stock, he bought the only assay office in a 10-mile radius, ensuring he knew the true wealth of every mine before the owners did. He became the invisible tax collector of the lode. By 1865, as the Civil War raged and the Comstock steeped mines, the big bonanza, began to drown in hot, sulfuric water, the problem of the lode shifted from finding silver to removing water. The cost of pumping was astronomical. Most miners faced ruin. This was Gus Thorne's moment. He didn't invent the solution, he financed the impossible one, the Sutro Tunnel. A massive, 4-mile-long drainage and ventilation tunnel, blasted through solid rock, designed to drain the entire lode from the ground up. The sheer ambition was lunatic, the engineering Herculean. Nobody would fund it, the established East Coast banks saw only risk. Gus, now a silent millionaire, did something extraordinary. He didn't just invest, he created a closed-loop financial system. He used his profits to buy the bonds of the Sutro Tunnel Company. Then, he leveraged those bonds to buy up the stock of the failing mines that needed the tunnel to survive. It was a vicious, brilliant cycle. He forced the entire lode into a symbiotic dependency on his capital. When the Sutro Tunnel was finally completed in 1878, Gus Thorne didn't just own a large portion of the Comstock. He owned the lifeline of the Comstock. He could slow the flow of silver, speed it up, or stop it entirely. He had effectively created a private, personalized central bank, operating on a desert mountain, entirely outside the control of Wall Street or the U.S. Treasury. The sheer scale of his operation was the first astonishing secret of the story. The U.S. government, desperate to stabilize the currency in the volatile post-war era, had to continually negotiate with Gus Thorn to control the supply of silver flowing into the mints. But the most astonishing, informative, and utterly concealed fact of Gus Thorn's rise lay in his methodology. Gus was not a ruthless robber baron in the mold of a Vanderbilt or a Carnegie. He was a synthesist. In his youth, he had been fascinated by the new science of cryptography and the emerging field of statistical analysis. His true brilliance was not in finance, but in creating the world's first truly effective, wide-reaching information network. He did not rely on the stock ticker. From 1860 onward, Gus secretly employed a small, highly paid, and ruthlessly loyal cadre of former telegraphers, newspaper typesetters, and even saloon keepers across the American West. Their job was not to send financial figures, but gossip, coded meteorological data, and details of local political maneuverings, the contextual information that financial markets never saw. He knew about the latest strike in Bodie 3 days before the San Francisco Chronicle printed it. He knew which senator was drinking too much in Sacramento and was desperate for a bribe. This network, known only in Thorn's inner circle as the Web, allowed him to predict market movements with a terrifying accuracy that appeared, to outsiders, to be nothing short of genius. In reality, it was the cold, hard logic of data mastery. By 1888, Gus Thorn was one of the wealthiest men in the world, yet his name was rarely mentioned in the Eastern papers, and his face was almost unknown. He operated out of a modest, heavily secured brownstone in San Francisco, not the glittering skyscrapers of Manhattan. The American audience, enamored with the saga of the Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, and Morgans, has never been taught that the true kingmaker of the Gilded Age was the man who deliberately stayed in the shadows, creating the template for modern information age dominance 100 years early. Now, Gus Thorn was old, ailing, and without an heir. The Comstock was played out. But the fortune, estimated at nearly $150 million in 1888 dollars, the equivalent of multiple billions today, was intact. He faced a dilemma that would define the next century. How do you secure a private fortune of this magnitude against the forces of government, taxation, and time itself? His answer was a final, breathtaking gamble. He would not simply invest his money. He would use it to construct a permanent, sovereign financial shield, a secret foundation built into the very architecture of the U.S. banking system, designed to act as a shadow treasury for the American future. And for this final act, he needed to find the only other person in the world who understood the true, terrifying power of unseen control, a disgraced, brilliant former Union Army cryptographer living in self-imposed exile in New Orleans, haunted by a secret he carried from the last days of the Civil War. His name was Elias the Cipher Vane, and his story is the second, most dangerous thread of this chronicle. The story continues, detailing Elias Vane's background, the Civil War code-breaking operation that led to his exile, and the astounding details of the secret contract he signed with Thorn to create a self-sustaining, hidden financial mechanism, the American Trust, designed to stabilize and secretly control key sectors of the U.S. economy for the next 100 years. Culminating in its role during the Great Depression and World War II. Book 2, The Cipher and the Covenant, 1888–1913. Chapter 2, The Haunted Cryptographer of New Orleans. Elias Vane was not a man one found, he was a relic one uncovered. In 1888, he resided in a crumbling Creole mansion in the Garden District of New Orleans, a city still steeped in the molasses-thick trauma of Reconstruction. Vane was famous, or infamous, for two contradictory things. He was the man who had broken the most complex Confederate field ciphers during the Civil War, giving the Union a near-clairvoyant advantage, and he was the man who had subsequently walked away from a hero's recognition, refusing all honors and vanishing into a self-imposed exile. His secret was simpler, and darker, than anyone knew. Vane had not just broken the Confederate ciphers, he had cracked a parallel, almost ceremonial, financial code used by a shadowy network of wealthy New England merchants and certain Washington officials. This second cipher revealed a vast, high-level profiteering scheme during the war, a coordinated manipulation of Union war bonds, cotton futures, and gold speculation that directly sabotaged the treasury in favor of a powerful few. Vane, a man driven by a profound, almost religious belief in the integrity of the Union, was shattered. When he presented his evidence, he was swiftly and quietly discredited. The very people he had served were deeply implicated. The choice was clear: expose the truth and risk plunging the already fractured North into a paralyzing financial scandal, or bury the evidence and save the fragile post-war economy. Vane chose silence, but it cost him his soul. He retired, nursing the terrible knowledge of how easily power and patriotism were corrupted by cold, structured greed. When Gus Thorne's agent, a meticulous former Pinkerton detective named Silas Reed, finally tracked Vane down, the cryptographer was a ghost. He spent his days transcribing the rhythmic chatter of the city's telegraph lines, not for content, but for the patterns and the noise, a fruitless quest to find order in chaos. Reed presented Vane with a single, cryptic package, a disassembled, gold-plated cipher machine and a handwritten note from Thorne. The note contained a single, astonishing equation: $text C_text Thorne \text I_text Vane =text S_text USA $where $text C_text Thorne $is the capital of Thorne, the Comstock fortune $text I_text Vane $is the indivisibility of Vane, the power of concealed structure $text S_text USA is the security of the United States of America. It was a challenge, a testament to the belief that Vane's intellectual rigor could, coupled with Thorne's unimaginable wealth, create a structure of absolute, unassailable financial stability, a stability Vane had seen tragically betrayed during the war. Chapter 3, The American Trust is formed. Vane traveled west. The meeting between the reclusive mining magnate and the disgraced codebreaker was brief and historic. They spoke not of profits, but of structural integrity, statistical risk, and the mathematics of long-term stability. Thorne laid out his vision: the fortune must be protected, not for personal legacy, but because the scale of the capital was now a national asset. If dispersed or absorbed, it would be wasted on frivolous consumption or vulnerable to political seizure. It had to be consolidated, made immune, and used to provide a secret counterweight to the manic instability of the American financial system. Vane's genius was in the architecture. He proposed the creation of the American Trust, TAT, an entity designed to be legally invisible and financially ubiquitous. The four pillars of invisibility: distributed legal ownership. The fortune was broken into hundreds of smaller, interlocking shell companies, each owning a fraction of the assets. These shells were then owned by a network of blind trusts, legally registered across 3 different states with conflicting and opaque property laws: Nevada, Delaware, and an obscure trust in the Kingdom of Hawaii, before its annexation. The goal was not to evade law, but to create a legal entity so complex that no single government or court could untangle its full scope within a human lifetime. The asset mix: the anti-portfolio. Thorne and Vane deliberately avoided the popular stocks of the day: oil, steel. Instead, they targeted 3 critical, unsexy, and essential sectors: Tier 1, infrastructure backbones, controlling minority stakes in regional rail lines, municipal water systems, and, most critically, the nascent telephone and electrical grid infrastructure. These assets generated steady, unassailable revenue regardless of boom or bust. Tier 2, contrarian insurance, massive investments in gold reserves and strategically overleveraged real estate in failed Midwestern farming areas. These assets were designed to gain value only during periods of severe national panic or depression, acting as a financial shock absorber. Tier 3, the information cartel, covert investment in newspaper printing presses, regional telegraph companies, and the new technology of the rotary press, ensuring they had control over the speed and distribution of public information, the ultimate insurance policy against market hysteria. The Code of the Ledger. Vane implemented a revolutionary double ledger system. The public ledger was a meticulously crafted, utterly boring document showing safe, moderate returns. The shadow ledger was the real document, maintained by Vane alone, using a system of statistical notation and cryptographical substitution that rendered it meaningless to anyone without the original key. This was the invisibility in Bain's equation, the zero inheritance protocol. The fortune was structured to perpetually reinvest at a specific rate, $3% annual growth after expenses. The crucial clause, no beneficiary could inherit or withdraw principal. The only withdrawals permitted were operating expenses and annual, fixed grants to a network of independent, nonpartisan, public policy think tanks, the security dividends. The money was designed to live forever as a silent engine of stability, not as personal wealth. Chapter 4. The Taming of the Panic of 1907. The American Trust's first true test came in the Panic of 1907. The panic was triggered by the failure of a major New York trust company, and quickly spiraled into a catastrophic bank run, threatening to collapse the entire American banking system. J.P. Morgan famously stepped in as a one-man central bank, locking the city's top financiers in his library until they pledged enough capital to stabilize the situation. This story is well known. But the full story is much stranger. At the height of the panic, the price of copper, crucial to the nation's rapidly expanding electrical infrastructure, plummeted, creating a cascading crisis that threatened to bankrupt the utility sector, the backbone of the modernizing nation. In his San Francisco brownstone, Gus Thorne, now gravely ill, watched the Telegraph reports. The official history records Morgan's intervention saving the banks. The secret history records the American Trust's intervention saving the nation's arteries. Under Bain's quiet, coded direction, the American Trust made a series of massive, synchronized purchases of utility and copper stock debt from a dozen panicked smaller banks across the Midwest and Northeast. This was not done for profit, but for liquidity stabilization. By absorbing the toxic assets at slightly above market prices, TAT broke the cascading cycle of panic selling in that crucial sector. The money moved through TAT's complex shell structure, making the funds appear to originate from a diverse group of European investors and small, private endowments. No one noticed the synchronicity of the moves, only the sudden, inexplicable calming of the utility market. The crisis in that sector simply ceased, allowing Morgan's larger banking sector interventions to finally take hold. The event confirmed the terrifying power of the trust. It was not just a fortune, it was a surgical financial weapon capable of exerting localized, systemic influence without leaving a single traceable signature. Thorne died peacefully 3 months later, knowing his life's work, not his money, but the structure Bain built, was secured. Elias Bain became the sole, anonymous guardian of the American Trust, the unseen architect who now held the invisible steering wheel of a significant portion of America's industrial backbone. His mandate was simple: maintain the invisibility, and preserve the structure. The next decades would demand that Bain use the Trust's power to navigate 2 world wars and the Great Depression, always operating in the shadows, always ensuring America's fundamental industrial engine never stalled. The story would then continue with Bain's role in covertly funding America's transition to industrial-scale war production in World War I, his strategic use of the anti-portfolio to gain control of bankrupt assets during the 1930s depression, and the astounding plot detail of how the American Trust secretly funded the crucial early research into the technology that would become the backbone of the military-industrial complex. Here is the continuation of the story, focusing on the most critical decades of the 20th century. Book 3, The Great Calibration, 1913 to 1945. Chapter 5, The Silent Partner of the Great War. The outbreak of World War I in Europe in 1914 instantly triggered a financial crisis in the United States. European investors liquidated American assets, gold flowed out, and the New York Stock Exchange was forced to close for months. Elias Bain, now in his 60s and operating from a quiet, anonymous office in Washington, D.C., saw this as the ultimate test of Thorne's vision. The American Trust, TAT, was perfectly positioned. Its assets were mostly domestic infrastructure, rail, power grids, and its anti-portfolio of contrarian gold and real estate was beginning to appreciate precisely as the markets crumbled. The astonishing truth of this period is that TAT acted as a de facto, shadow Federal Reserve years before the actual Fed was fully operational and stable. When the U.S. finally entered the war in 1917, the need for immediate, industrial-scale production of armaments, ships, and vehicles was immense. Traditional banks were hesitant to lend the colossal sums required to retool factories. Vane directed TAT to execute a series of high-risk, high-reward financing moves. He didn't lend money directly to the government. Instead, he used TAT's capital to quietly underwrite the supply chain. The Copper Gambit, TAT, through its shell companies, purchased long-term futures contracts for all available domestic copper output. This stabilized the price of the vital metal, giving suppliers the confidence to ramp up production without fearing a price collapse, thus ensuring a steady supply for the military.